The air in the living room was so thick with the cloying scent of wilting lilies and stale tea, it felt like you could chew it. Each mournful inhale was a reminder of the void left behind, a void that, for Erin, was only further complicated by the recent, rather unsettling, revelations about Grandpa Joe's clandestine past. The gentle, almost mournful, ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to mock the stillness, its rhythm a stark contrast to the turbulent undercurrents of grief and unspoken anxieties that rippled through the assembled family. Aunt Carol, bless her cotton socks, had clearly gone overboard with the floral arrangements. The lilies drooped precariously, their waxy petals practically weeping onto the polished mahogany of the side tables. Beside them sat a veritable graveyard of teacups, each one bearing the faint imprint of lipstick and the ghost of a forced smile. Erin, perched on the edge of a velvet armchair that felt far too large and decidedly too scratchy for her current mood, found herself shrinking under the weight of familial expectation. Every hushed whisper, every sympathetic nod, felt like another invisible thread tightening around her, tethering her to a grief that felt both profound and strangely, almost comically, complicated. Orla, of course, was in her element, or at least, as close to an element as anyone could be in a room saturated with such pervasive melancholy. Her trusty camcorder, a relic from a more optimistic, pre-digital age that Orla stubbornly refused to upgrade, was clutched in her hands like a life raft. Its whirring lens captured every fleeting expression, every awkward shuffle of feet, every almost missed hug. Her commentary, delivered in hushed, conspiratorial tones that were amplified by the microphone's sensitivity, was a masterclass in surrealist observation. "Look, Auntie Mary's doing that thing with her eyebrows again," as she'd whisper, her voice barely audible above the drone of polite condolences. "It's like she's trying to communicate with the beyond through sheer follicular intensity." Fascinating. Really. Perhaps it's a form of spiritual semaphore. Erin could only offer a pained grimace, a silent plea for her cousin to at least pretend to be mourning in a manner befitting the solemnity of the occasion. But Orla's grief, if it could be called that, was a performance art piece, a Dadaist exploration of loss, and Erin found herself strangely captivated, even as she wished for a mercifully long battery life for the camcorder. The cousins' shared desire for escape was a silent pact, a desperate yearning to shed the oppressive weight of Derry and its perpetual grey skies. The wake, with its ritualistic pronouncements of grief and its underlying currents of familial obligation, served only to amplify this need. Each forced platitude, each well-meaning but ultimately stifling embrace, was another push towards the horizon. They were a quartet on the cusp of something new, their collective ennui a breeding ground for an impulsive, audacious plan. The scent of lilies, once a symbol of respect, had morphed into the pungent aroma of their impending freedom, a potent reminder that even in the midst of sorrow, life, and the desire for adventure, had a way of finding its footing. They endured the ritualistic display of sorrow, the hushed murmurs of sympathy that felt as hollow as a drum, and the pervasive sense of being trapped in a monochrome world. "Right," a Michelle whispered, nudging Claire with an elbow. Phase 1. Operation Distraction. "I'm going to go and comfort Auntie Brenda. You know, the one with the ridiculously tight perm. I'll see if I can engage her in a deep and meaningful conversation about, I don't know, the optimal soil pH for begonias. That should buy us at least 10 minutes. Claire nodded, a flicker of amusement in her eyes, a rare spark in the otherwise somber atmosphere. "And what's Phase 2? "Phase 2, and Michelle grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye, is the coordinated vanishing act. You cause a diversion, spill some tea, perhaps. Or, better yet, feign a sudden, dramatic collapse. I'll be making my move towards the back door. We rendezvous at the usual spot, post-haste." Erin, overhearing their hushed strategizing, felt a pang of both envy and a strange sense of anticipation. Their escape, however reckless, was undeniably tempting. The thought of leaving behind the stifling familiarity of Derry, the endless cycle of passive-aggressive relatives and the overwhelming weight of impending adulthood was a siren's song. She watched as Orla, oblivious to their clandestine plans, continued her meticulous documentation, her camcorder's lens a detached, unblinking eye on the unfolding drama. The cousins' shared desire for escapism, a common thread woven through their otherwise disparate personalities, was about to manifest in a way that would change the trajectory of their lives. The wake, an event designed to bring them together in shared remembrance, was inadvertently propelling them apart, towards a future that was as uncertain as it was exhilarating. The quiet ticking of the clock was no longer just a marker of time passing, it was the soundtrack to their escape, each tick a countdown to freedom. The oppressive atmosphere, so thick with the scent of lilies and the unspoken grief of a community, was the very catalyst that would propel them towards a new, uncharted territory, a continental drift away from the familiar, the predictable, and the profound. The cousins, united in their quiet rebellion, were already halfway out the door, their minds on anything but the mournful proceedings, their eyes fixed on the promise of a world beyond the suffocating embrace of their Derry reality. The sheer, unadulterated boredom of it all was a more potent force than any familial obligation. Erin felt a familiar sense of being caught between worlds. Her grandfather, a man she had loved and admired, was gone. Yet, in the wake of his death, the carefully constructed edifice of his life had begun to crumble, revealing hidden cracks and unexpected depths. The casual revelations about his past, dropped like landmines amidst the condolences and the tea, had left her reeling. It wasn't just the fact that he'd had a secret, it was the nature of that secret, a whisper of a life lived beyond the confines of Derry, a life that seemed to hum with an unfamiliar melody. It made her question everything she thought she knew, not just about him, but about the very fabric of their family, their history, and by extension, her own place within it. The stifling expectation to simply grieve, to offer the prescribed performance of sorrow, felt increasingly difficult, almost performative, when the foundations of that grief felt so shaky. Orla, ever the unwavering documentarian of their collective chaos, seemed to sense Erin's internal turmoil, her camcorder invariably swinging towards her cousin whenever a particularly pensive expression crossed Erin's face. "You look like you're contemplating the existential weight of a particularly stubborn scone, Erin," Orla observed, her voice a low murmur directly into the microphone. "Is it the butter? Or is it the deep-seated fear that your entire understanding of reality might be about to undergo a seismic shift, much like the geological plates upon which we all precariously balance?" Erin managed a weak smile. "Something like that, Orla. Just thinking." "Thinking is good," Orla nodded sagely, adjusting the focus on her lens. "It's what separates us from the truly unenlightened, those who merely exist. Though, to be fair, the existential dread associated with intense thought can be rather debilitating. Perhaps a strong cup of tea, or a vigorous session of interpretive dance, would be more beneficial. I'm sensing a certain interpretative dance energy from this room, aren't you?" Erin's gaze drifted to Michelle and Claire, who were now engaged in a frantic, silent exchange of hand signals near the kitchen door. Michelle, with a furtive glance towards the hallway, mimed an opening of a door, then a quick dash, followed by a thumbs up. Claire, in response, pretended to adjust her glasses, then mimed a swift, decisive turn, her expression one of determined purpose. Their exit strategy was clearly in full swing, a testament to their shared, unwavering commitment to escapism. The mournful proceedings, the hushed tones, the drooping lilies, none of it could hold them. They were already halfway to the bus station in their minds, their eyes fixed not on the sad ritual of the wake, but on the glittering, distant promise of adventure. The air, thick with the scent of wilting flowers and unspoken regrets, was about to be cleaved by the swift, decisive departure of two girls who had clearly had enough. The oppressive atmosphere of the wake, rather than grounding them in grief, was instead serving as the fertile ground for their rebellion, a stark reminder that sometimes the most profound act of remembrance is to embrace the life that still pulses, the life that calls them away from the shadows and towards the light. The cousins, a quartet of young women teetering on the precipice of adulthood, found themselves united by a common desire to flee, to escape the gravitational pull of Derry and its suffocating embrace, their hearts already set on a course for a new horizon, far from the wilting lilies and the stale tea. The air in the bus, a heady concoction of stale cigarette smoke, damp wool, and the faint, lingering aroma of grief, felt surprisingly liberating. For Erin, it was a tangible escape from the suffocating floral tributes and the relentless drone of sympathetic murmurs that had permeated her family home. The wake, a necessary purgatory, had been endured. Now, the rumble of the engine beneath them was a promise of movement, of distance, of a world decidedly not painted in the muted greys and browns of Derry. Beside her, Orla, predictably, had her camcorder already trained on the passing scenery, her commentary a low, conspiratorial hum. "Observe, Erin," as she whispered, her voice barely a breath against the vibration of the bus, at the relentless march of progress. Or, at least, the relentless march of semi-detached houses. Fascinating. Really. I wonder if they have particularly well-maintained gnomes. Michelle, ever the pragmatist, was already engrossed in a crumpled travel brochure, her brow furrowed in concentration. The lure of distant cities and the promise of unsupervised evenings at ungodly hours had clearly trumped any lingering sense of solemnity. Claire, meanwhile, sat bolt upright, a tightly clenched fist around her worn copy of the Communist Manifesto, her expression a mixture of fierce determination and a subtle, almost imperceptible nervousness. She was clearly ready to embrace whatever philosophical and political enlightenment the continent had to offer, even if it meant navigating the unpredictable currents of her companion's collective chaos. And James, the wee English feller, bless his anachronistic cardigan, sat a few seats away, his gaze fixed on the window, a faint air of apprehension clinging to him like the damp Derry air they were finally leaving behind. His presence was a quiet acknowledgement of the pact they'd all implicitly made. To endure this trip, to escape Derry, and perhaps, just perhaps, to figure out what came next. Their reluctant chaperone, Sister Michael, occupied a seat near the front, her posture